Morning, beautiful, beautiful people. What a gorgeous day it is. I have a very different view of the world this morning. Just have a listen to this. Hopefully you can hear that. The most sweet and gorgeous bird song this morning. And it is the 12th of January. The days are getting longer already. Have you noticed the days are getting longer already? October time, we went from day to night, now we've got this twilight building back into the world, and you've got that kind of bluey mauvey light as the light begins to fade and fall away. So things are absolutely in shift. And my latest podcast, links will be in this video. My latest podcast, I'm sharing my thoughts around this new cycle of time, this linear, this calendar year. I had this, Spirit called it, don't make resolutions, create a paradigm shift, and we talk about that in the video, and I thought just that is so punchy. Don't create resolutions, create a paradigm shift. So I'm really kind of sharing that, getting really deep into that, really going into that conversation, diving straight into it. So you can find the links there within this video to our latest podcast. But here I am, I'm sitting on this most beautiful bench, and I've had the most incredible 24 hours, which I'm going to share in the next podcast, and maybe I'll touch on it on a future video as well. But those of you that know my story, those of you that have followed me for a few years now, you'll know or may recognize this bench. This bench was a significant milestone in my journey, in my world, in my life, in my story. And this is the bench that so much happened. It was beyond here that I literally kind of went into the unknown and started a whole chain of events in my life. So in a nutshell, very brief if I can, I want this video to be around 5 minutes, no longer. But around 9-10 years ago, I had major surgery. I've had 2 hip replacements, nasty nasty bout of kind of rare form of arthritis known as ankylosing spondylitis, and I was told to prepare yourself for a wheelchair, Shane, that is where things are going. Had surgery, and I had the most incredible physiotherapist who said to me, what is it, before we start, what is it that you want? And I said, to be able to walk out of here. She went and she smiled and she looked at me and said, right, let's get you sitting up and let's visualize that before we start. And what does that feel like, and what does that look like? Amazing, incredible lady. And then I later find out that she's a Reiki therapist. Sometimes these things are never by chance, they are by design. And she said to me, what we need to do is we need to get you on a static bike when you come out of hospital. And I thought, let's go a step further, and I got on a real bike, cycled to the end of the road and cycled back where I'm living. And I was exhausted, I slept for hours and hours and hours. But the thing was, the next day I repeated, and within a few weeks of doing that, I was not sleeping nowhere near as much after. I got to the point where I wasn't sleeping at all after. Then I was going a little bit further, and then I can remember the moment where I got to the end of the road, and I always had someone looking out for me in the early weeks of doing that. Got to the end of the road, and I'd said to them, I'm ready to do something more. Got to the end of the road and I just turned left. And I cycled all the way around, done my first mile. My first mile went to 5 miles, 10 miles, then we jumped to 25, and then we jumped to 40 and 50. By then I'm cycling some distance, but you know how that distance come about was I can remember the first time I'd cycled on my own any sense of distance, and that was from home to this bench, and it is only probably 3 or 4 miles, 3 or 4 miles if that. And I can remember looking down the trail, which is kind of beside me here, okay, and actually part of that trail leads to this beautiful cottage and this Saxon church that's not far away, but parallel to that this trail. And I remember looking down that trail and saying to myself, next week that is where I'm going to go. Next week I'm heading down that trail, and that was 10 years back. And then that had a whole chain of events where I ended up then cycling with a wonderful person in my world at the time, from the top of North Devon all the way back to our home in Sussex, and I will share that in a future short video and in the next podcast. And then that moved on from then cycling with really good friends and family across the country, and then that then proceeded to up the west coast of Scotland and all the way back down through the middle over the Grampian Mountains and the Cairngorm Mountains. And what I take from that, Spirit always said to me, just put one foot in front of the other, metaphorically, literally. And I think that's the thing with, where we're sitting. So many of us are kind of looking at that year ahead, and I invite you to go and look, listen, explore the latest podcast, okay? Instead of creating New Year's resolutions, create a paradigm shift. I'm going to leave it there because the video, as always, is run over from my 5 minutes to 7 minutes and some. So listen, I'm wishing you a beautiful day, and I will be back very, very soon because I have another story to why I'm sitting on this bench this morning, and next to a beautiful ride, and the whole story about that. So until next time, keep shining guys, keep shining, and do go and explore that podcast.